Amen. Thank you for that, Fellowship Theater Project. Give them another clap for that. Amen. It's so good to be before you today. Again, I'm grateful for the opportunity in Reverend Whitaker's absence, and of course for my pastor, Bridget, over there, my boss, who keeps me in line. I will be speaking to you today from Isaiah chapter 6, which was beautifully dramatized by Mr. Eric. Just a few verses of that. Then one of the seraphs flew to me, holding a live coal that had been taken from the altar with a pair of tongs. The seraph touched my mouth with it and said, "Now that this has touched your lips, your guilt has departed, and your sin is blotted out." Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" And I said, "Here I am, send me." Now, it took a while to get there. I don't remember quite the first time I feel like I heard the voice of God pushing me in the direction of this calling, in the direction of ministry. But I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I was sitting in church, as usual, Christian Unity Baptist Church in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I would love when my favorite preacher would get up. And her name was Reverend Audrey Johnson. And Reverend Audrey would get up and she would preach, and she was just so stoic, and her stories were my favorite. And so I remember sitting back in my seat and, trying my best to pay attention because I was 9. So it was church. I didn't really want to be there the whole service, but I was trying my best to pay attention. But when she would speak, I was captivated. And I remember saying when I was about 8 or 9, I think I want to be a preacher. Now, a lot of stuff happened in between 9 and 29, but I was about 9 when I said that. And what I loved about her and what made me want to do what she did was I wanted to be a storyteller. I wanted to tell stories, much like the stories we just heard from the Fellowship Theater Project. I wanted to just get on stage and tell stories. I wasn't concerned about church. I was trying to get out of church. I was tired of going to church every Sunday, okay? I just want to tell stories. And so I did. I became an actor, and I went to school, and I majored in musical theater, and I told stories. I learned how to tell stories. And so I thought I was okay, but then there was always this nagging feeling like you should be doing a little bit more. God is calling you to something more. And so I became a songwriter. And through songwriting, I was able to tell stories. And so, okay, I'm doing what I said I was going to do. I'm going to tell stories. But there was always this nagging presence coming back. You should be doing a little bit more. I'm calling you to something greater, something beyond the realm of your imagination. And so I finally, after years of playing tug of war and sending God to voicemail, I finally said, okay, God, yes, okay, I guess I'll go to seminary or whatever. And I did that. And I remember reading all of these different call narratives in the Bible. So you have Isaiah and Moses and Gideon and all these great people who were called by God. And so I started feeling some type of way. I was like, God, I got a bone to pick with you, okay? Because I've been looking for a sign saying this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Moses got a burning bush. You know what I'm saying? Isaiah has seraphs flying in and touching his lips with coal. I mean, God, come on. Gideon, he met Gideon, while he was pressing wheat through a wine press. I said, God, where's my call? I ain't get no call narrative. I've been sitting here waiting for you to give me a sign that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. To be commissioned formally. I want to see the train coming down the center of from the Lord coming down the center of the aisle, and I want fire and flames and bushes and everything. Where's my bush? I didn't get a bush. And so I was sitting there like, yo, I really have a bone to pick with God. I really don't feel like I've been formally commissioned. And then I began to reflect on Isaiah's journey. And what I love so much about Isaiah, son of Amos, who prophesied in Judah, was that he was already working when God commissioned him. We don't get much about Isaiah's childhood. He wasn't asked to do this work, and he didn't have the power that the kings and the priests might have had. Yet Isaiah had a vision. He had many visions, and it seemed that his gifts made room for him, that these visions pushed him into his purpose. We see a steady performance of Isaiah's duties, his duty for the cry for justice and righteousness on behalf of his people and his land. But Isaiah isn't called by God and commissioned by God until chapter 6. The call and the commissioning came 6 chapters into this book, showing us that he was already working, he was already telling stories. Some of us have been waiting on God to commission us, for God to reveal to us our purpose or our calling. God, just show me a sign. But perhaps God is waiting on us to start working and to start moving in the direction of our passions, waiting on us to start activating and initiating some things in our lives, to start telling those stories with or without a call or a commission. Maybe you've been waiting on the right title, for enough money to start your business, for your big break. But perhaps God is waiting on you to activate, waiting on you to start working and fighting for justice like Isaiah had been doing for the first 5 chapters, and like many of us who have been called by God are already doing. And one of the funny things about Isaiah's commissioning is, like many people, he questioned God. Like many of us, we question God. Even in that, we get our sign, we get our burning bush, and we get our, seraphs flying in, and we still be like, yo, got me? For real? You really calling me to do this work, God? And Isaiah says, but God, I have unclean lips, and I live amongst an unclean people. But what I love about God is God doesn't pass Isaiah up because of that. What I love about God and the people who were called by God is how imperfect they were. Many of them felt unqualified to do the work that God was calling them to do. Almost everybody called by God had something to say about it, a rebuttal or a rejection. Even Moses was like, God, I am slow of speaking. I have a slow tongue. And Gideon was like, God, but my people are weak. And God still took the opportunity to say, I still call and I commission you. You don't have to be perfect to serve Fort Washington. You don't have to be perfect to march. You don't have to be perfect to love your neighbor. You don't have to be perfect to join the Poor People's Campaign. You don't have to be perfect or have an advanced degree or make a lot of money or be a part of the in crowd to change the world. God is not looking to commission perfect people. Isaiah tells God he has unclean lips. And God sends seraphs to purify him. God can use each and every one of us right where we are, unclean and untidy, messy and mean. Even when we mean, God can still use us. God is not waiting on us to be perfect. Perhaps God is waiting for us to simply say, here I am. Send me. Despite the personal trials and the economic tribulations and the political dysfunction, God is waiting for us to say, listen, I may be poor and ignorant, but here I am, God. I may be broken and unqualified, but here I am, God. I may have a complicated past, but here I am. Send me, God. Use me. God. Perhaps it is because we are poor and broken that God finds favor with us. Perhaps it was because Isaiah had unclean lips, but was ready and available to do the work that God found favor in him. And every time God reassures us, every time God reminds us, even in our questioning our validity and questioning our qualifications, God reminds us that God is walking with us. So what do we have to fear, Fort Washington? It's that easy, right? It's easy. God's with us. We good. Here I am. Send me. What's the big deal? What is the problem? What do we have to fear? There's a saying that if it were this easy, everyone would do it. Well, if the story ended with us merely saying yes to God, everyone would do it. But it doesn't. It seems as if as soon as I said yes to God, my life went into disarray. I didn't know if I was being baptized or if I was drowning. Everything just started to crumble, right? That this yes came with consequences. And the lectionary doesn't quite expose us to the underbelly of Isaiah's call. We have to continue reading beyond verse 8. Right? To get to the heart of the confusion, God calls Isaiah to deliver difficult news to a people who have already suffered so much. Difficult news. God didn't call him to just preach on Sunday and go home and eat a nice meal. God called him to deliver difficult news. News like 1,500 immigrant children have been separated from their families and are missing. News like Puerto Rico still won't have electricity for the next 6 months. News like the clean water Flint, Michigan has been waiting on for 4 years is still delayed. Difficult news for a suffering people. This wasn't fun and games. Isaiah's commissioning wasn't fun and games. He was called to give difficult news to a devastated people. It seems like God was setting Isaiah up for failure, calling him to prophesy destruction and devastation, not restoration and redemption that the people were looking for. Saying yes to God ain't easy. Saying here I am ain't easy. Sometimes saying here I am means relinquishing control of what you thought your life was going to look like. Sometimes saying, here I am, send me, means stepping into the line of fire. Sometimes saying, here I am, send me, means preparing your community for further destruction. We can't control what God is going to call us to do. God tells Isaiah to prepare the people for punishment. Even amidst Isaiah's skepticism and his confusion, he moves. He moves forward saying yes to God over and over again. Yes to the mystery. Yes to the misery. Yes to the different ways that God was trying to use him that was uncomfortable. Here I am. Send me. Here I am. Send me. Isaiah wasn't naive. He'd been doing this work for a very, very long time before his commissioning. He was familiar with the long, harrowing struggle of his people, of the stories of his ancestors in the wilderness for 40 years, suffering. Yet he still stood before God, knowing everything he knew. He stood before God and he said, here I am, send me. Send me, God. Fort Washington, when the time comes, will we be able to say, here we are? Send us. Send us into the fire. Send us into the devastation. Send us into the destruction. God, here we are. Send us, knowing everything we know about the consequences of this work for justice and mercy and walking humbly with God, could we still say, God, send me? Knowing everything we know about Gideon's story and Esther's story and Jesus and Peter and Malcolm and Martin and Asada Shakur, could we still say, God, here I am, send me? Will we be able to stand firmly and say, here we are? Send us, God, to stand against the empire. Send us, God, to hold our government officials accountable. Send us, God, to reclaim Jesus. Reclaim Jesus, even if it means getting arrested. Send us, God, to fight for our missing children, even if it takes years to get a resolution. Could we say that to God, knowing everything we know? The song says, here I am, send me. Here I am, send me. Here I am, send me, God. Oh, here I am, send me. Here I am, send me. Here I am, send me, God. Oh, here I am. Could we say that to God today? Could we stand firmly in that yes to God, knowing all we know about the evils of this world, knowing that we might not see the fruits of our labor, knowing that the change we seek to create might not happen in our lifetimes? Could we still say yes to this work, to justice and mercy and loving kindness and walking humbly with God? Could we say yes to that? Could we say yes today and not tomorrow? And not next year, not when we get our lives together, not when we get our money together, not when our kids go to college, but yes, today, to doing this work that we have been called to do in this faith community. Could we say yes? Could we say, here we are, God, send us. Here I am, send me. Here I am, send me. Here I am, send me, God. Oh, say, here I am, send me. Here I am, send me. Here I am, send me, God. Send us forth to create in our ways. Everybody has a different role in this journey. Some of you were meant to be in Fellowship Theater Project, telling stories so that we can heal. Could we say to God, I may not be qualified, but I'm available. I may not be Angela Davis or Bishop Curry or Reverend Barbara, but I'm available, God. Send me anyway. I'm broken. I ain't got a PhD. I barely got another master's degree. God, I don't have a high school diploma, but send me anyway. God is calling us to say yes before knowing what the end is going to be. Say yes even when we have confusion. Say yes even when we have unclean lips. This is what Isaiah teaches us today as we go forward. So I commission you, when you leave here, to make that step today, not tomorrow or next week or next year, but to say, today, God, I receive this power that you are dropping on me. Set a fire within my soul so that I can have a torch to burn in the darkest hour. Here we are, God. Send us. In Jesus' name, amen.